Yeah,
What's
man.
up, everybody? Kyle and Josh here, back with a brand new episode of Those Two Dads. What's up, dude?
Yeah, man. I cannot believe the last 2 weeks flew by as fast as they did.
It's just flying by.
This was coming up, and I was like, hey, it's been 2 weeks. We're like, what?
Well, and here we are again, man. So today we're back with our first musical guest.
Yes.
That's exciting stuff. So Shannon Hudson is a husband, a father, and masterful Americana country artist. So his favorite moments are, like a lot of us dads, are the little ones. You know, watching his son catch a line drive in the outfield, floating in the pool with his wife, watching the sunset over the Texas hills in his backyard. When he plays live music, it's usually solo with an acoustic guitar. He tries to write songs that capture a little bit of our humanity, something that's not really current or that the current world tends to strip away from people these days.
Right. Which is
cool.
So
Shannon grew up on 50s and 60s rock and roll like Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, who's actually in his family tree. And so even Elvis, not part of his family tree, but, you know, Elvis.
He listened to Elvis, yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't until his teen years that he got into other bands like Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, Aerosmith, you know, some of the good classics.
Oh, yeah. Good old hair bands.
Yeah, buddy. So Shannon's love of music grew into starting a band with his brother, playing different clubs in Los Angeles when he was living out there, and even moving into playing shows around the country. So Shannon now releases music in the Americana country style, and his newest release is titled Man of Your Dreams, which can be heard on most major streaming platforms like Spotify or Apple Music. So
I like it.
Yeah, man. So before we bring him on, as always, we're your hosts. I'm Kyle. This is Josh.
Yo.
We are always pumped to bring you new and exciting episodes of Those Two Dads and get to showcase different dads and dad talents around and how they're balancing their family life and supporting their families with the things that they're doing, right? So before we get going, go ahead and give us a subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, give us the likes, the hearts, all that good stuff. Please help us grow this channel and this podcast to help us bring you more cool and awesome dads to showcase. So without further ado, Josh, do you want to bring in our guest?
Absolutely. Here we go, Mr. Shannon Hudson. What's going on, man?
What's up?
Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Oh,
glad to be here.
Doing awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, goodness. Definitely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Excited to chat with you guys about it.
Yeah, we are too, man.
For sure. It's you know, like Kyle said, we've never had a music artist on our show. And you know, there's people that have talked about they've, you know, played instruments and things like that, but nobody that's actually actively creating music. And so it's kind of exciting because we get to see a different side of, you know, the entrepreneurial world, because, you know, as most people probably have figured, musicians are really kind of the truest form of entrepreneurs, because you kind of got to put yourself out there at the highest degree, and you're branding yourself and you're doing all these things. And so it's super cool. We're super glad to have you. I know it's going to be a good time here, but yeah, right away getting into it, tell us a little bit, you know, introduce yourself, let the world know who you are, Those Two Dads world. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Shannon Hudson, and you know, like Kyle was saying, I kind of grew up with a lot of music around me, and I have just been sort of a singer since, you know, I was a little bitty kid, and probably was singing songs before I could walk. And something about melodies and songs and singing just has always stuck with me and been a big deal to me. I have very, very vivid memories of things from when I was very young that get triggered by a song, or I know the exact song that was playing in the car when we were cruising in our silver Oldsmobile in Katy, Texas, when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. For some reason, you know, I think everybody has a little bit of like, this song was the soundtrack to this summer or this year in high school or whatever it was. And for me, I have a lot of songs that are the soundtrack of a lot of different parts of my life. So I've always kind of had an ear for something like that, and sort of did a lot of the traditional things that people do. I was in like bands in high school. Like I played clarinet starting in whenever you start in elementary school,
Yeah.
3rd grade or 4th grade or whatever the first grade you could do that stuff. And took piano lessons as a kid real young, and then it got to a point at some point where I was sort of writing songs, not very seriously. And then when I got to college is really when I sort of went, well, hey, like I actually really like doing this, and this is something that I do fairly well. And at that time I was living.
Did you do gigs in college, like the local bars?
Yeah, so my first year of college, I went. So I kind of grew up between Wisconsin and Texas because of my dad's job, and I went to college in Southern California at a small university called Pepperdine, which is in Malibu, right outside of LA. If you've ever been there, it's a gorgeous place. And
I used to live right there. So.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so my freshman year, I really didn't play at all, and I kind of wrote like a handful of things. It's probably the first time I really like wrote songs and lyrics that I really thought I was trying to say something or whatever. But my sophomore year, I lived in Germany the entire year because they have a great international program at that university, and I really didn't play guitar going into my sophomore year of college, but you can't take a piano with you to Europe. And
you're really just competing with David Hasselhoff in Germany, right?
Exactly. So my grandmother, God bless her and God rest her soul, bought me a guitar so I could take it to Europe. So I kind of was learning, and just you're in this new place, you're experiencing all this new stuff, and just wrote tons and tons of songs while also learning how to play guitar. And then it was, the sort of house I lived in had 50 or 60 people that were all Pepperdine students that lived in this huge place. It's kind of a big dorm, but it's really an old house that you live in. And
nothing like going to Germany and immersing yourself in a dorm room of Pepperdine students.
Yeah, exactly. And I would start, and so I'm getting to your question of shows.
I love the story.
But I would start playing. You just become sort of this little mini family. These like 50, 60 people are just like your brothers and sisters at that point. And I started the people are listening to me write out these songs and play, and I'm annoying them. And I was like, well, let's just do like a little get together in the kitchen, one evening, and I'll actually sort of put on a performance and play them. And then it became a thing where somebody would grab a tambourine and a harmonica or whatever and sort of play along. And that was kind of the start of when I got back to the States my junior year. All of a sudden I had a 60-person following that was built in. Because awesome. These are like my best friends, and then I have my other friends that I haven't seen in a year, and then you sort of have friends and friends, and you really, I was very lucky because I got to go from 0 to 100, 150 people that within reason would come and see me play wherever I was going to play. And in Los Angeles at the time, and I don't know what it's like now because I haven't been there a long time, and a lot of cities are like this. The venues can't have people come and play that don't draw people. Like they can't lose money on you playing because the real estate is so expensive and stuff like that. So, where I lucked out more than anywhere, and I have a theory in this story, but I think it's true, is we sent out, I'd put a band together at that point, and I'd sent out a bunch of demo CDs on a Friday to a bunch of venues in LA and like famous venues like the Whiskey and the Troubadour and the Viper Room and these places that are on Sunset Strip and stuff like that. We had played at a local bar for a couple years at this point. And I got a call on like the Monday or Tuesday afterwards. And my theory is, and they asked if we wanted to play on that Friday night at the Whiskey on the Whiskey A Go Go, where the Doors were the house band and where Radiohead first played when they toured the US, sort of the place. And my
wild.
theory is that a band had canceled on them. Like I think I envisioned, the woman's name was Leah, and I envisioned Leah got this call and the band's like, I'm sorry, our drummer's got in a car wreck and we can't play. And she's like, well, F you, and hangs up the phone. And our demo just happens to be playing in the CD player because they just opened it in the mail. And she's like, who are those people? See if they can cover this.
They seem like they're going to be available this Friday.
But we got a call and they were, you have to bring 50 people. And I think that was the only show, they call it pay to play, where you actually you had to buy the tickets from them up front.
Oh.
And now at that point in time, I was like, there's no way we don't get 50 people. Like, I just can't imagine that not happening. And I think we probably got 150, 200 people because we were excited. We're like, this is like the big club and da 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 da. And
like, you're playing at the Whiskey. Like, how can you not?
Yeah, I mean, mind blowing for us. And so we never had to like pay up front ever again after that show. And we probably played at the Whiskey somewhere near 30-ish times over the next number of years. It just kind of became our home venue, really. So yeah, it was so we played a lot of those clubs that I named off in LA for a 2 to 3 year period of time, where we were playing somewhere between 50 and 300 people would be like a really, really good night that would happen once in a while.
That's awesome.
Josh, there's so many parallels between like some of the stuff that we talk about with like online marketing or digital marketing about, about creating your brand and like having like these raving fans, right? That follow you and do those sort of things. And like, it really, that sort of term raving fans really stems from musicians than it does anything else,
for sure.
So that's super cool. Shannon, was this? I don't know how old of a guy you are, but like, is Facebook around? Like, I feel like you're like my age, where like Facebook like was just coming out when I was in college.
Yeah, so I'm 45. So everything I just described to you was probably even before MySpace was a thing, or MySpace was just becoming a thing. But none of it was around when I was in college.
So that made it more difficult then to get the word out for these types of things, right? It's not like you could just go on your Facebook profile and be like, 3,000 fans. I'm going to be playing at, the Whiskey Room a Friday night. Come show up.
My friends used to make fun of me at how much time I spent once I got a cell phone, which was not, I mean, I'm old enough where cell phone, most people at my college, which was, I mean, Pepperdine's there's a bunch of rich people that go to Pepperdine. It's an expensive place. Yeah. Most people I went to college with didn't have a cell phone because it was just that time period. So once I had a cell phone, it was just, and I would call people because texting back then was actually really expensive. You only got like so many.
I gotta wait for the nice weekends.
So I always had like I would spend hours calling lists of people like, hey, we're on tomorrow night and da da da, and then it'd come the like late morning of the show or the early afternoon. Hey, yeah, we're on at 10 tonight. Don't forget.
Some of those lessons typical, that you. Oh, sorry, Josh. Cutting you off. Some of those early lessons, because that is a lot of hard work. That is a lot of hustle. That's a lot of dedication on the marketing side. Like that's without music. That's like hustling to just get the gigs, get the shows, get the people to show up, make sure that you can fulfill that pay to play promise. Do those lessons translate to like right now as you're getting ready to launch an album and you're going out and you're doing things like our show and whatever the publicity run is for you? Like, does that all help with?
I think the underlying stuff is all the same, which is, being willing to do within reason, put in some effort and the time and stuff like that. But the execution of it it's just completely different because, well, I mean, also my goals now are very different. At the time, I had a crystal clear goal. We wanted a record deal and to be rock stars and to be able to go on the road and play, you know, theaters or bigger for the rest of our lives, and essentially like live at the bar. Like, it was the goal.
Yep.
And so, interestingly enough, you know, money at that time was never our goal. And in fact, we figured something out pretty early on doing those shows at the Whiskey that to me was genius. It was really our bass player at the time that had the idea, but the Wyndham Bellage at the time, I don't know if it's still there, it's a hotel, and it was right across the street from the Whiskey. And we figured out that we could get a room at the Wyndham Bellage with this huge patio for, I don't know, a couple $100, and we were making somewhere between $400 and maybe $800 for shows there, depending on how many people showed up. And we realized we could just get a room, buy however much money we had left over, full of beer and stuff like that, and then literally just tell everybody in the crowd the after parties across the street at the Wyndham Bellage, and we'd like have to load out and do all this stuff. By the time we got to the party, there were 200 people in this hotel room and on this patio. And I'll never forget the first time we did it. I had maybe 5 or 6 people that night just be like, "You guys are the greatest band ever, because we come see your show and then we drink for free at your hotel room." And in my head, I'm thinking, well, you're not drinking for free. You all paid for all this, like we
Yep.
did. But I also was like, this is what we want, like, because we want it to be a scene. We want people going to our show knowing, oh, you go to that show, but you go to the show and there's a whole party and everybody's
It's a whole
hanging out,
experience.
and it's an experience, which then brings people back over and over and over again.
Right.
So I think, you know, if you're studying marketing for anything, like that's what you're trying to get is some sort of experience. And as far as translating it to be like really like truthful with you guys, I haven't figured out how to translate that. I know how to translate it on a local level if I'm grabbing an acoustic guitar and playing a show in my neighborhood or at like some local bar down the street, because that's an event. But in the digital international space that we're in now with music, I'm going through a bunch of learning right now on it. I don't say I don't know anything about it because I think I'm stupid or whatever, but like I'm learning because I haven't released anything. The last time I released something, you know, Spotify didn't exist, and the iTunes store, I don't think existed when we first released it. It did like a little bit afterwards. So
Sure.
So, you know, you have people streaming it's like I have people streaming my songs and I don't even know how many countries, a lot of different countries right now. And it's like, I can't just like tell everybody the party's at the hotel room across the street.
Right.
It's not.
Right. Well, it's almost like, you know, nowadays, a lot of that, even when you go to live shows, you don't get a lot of those experiences anyways, because a lot of what these bands and artists are doing now is they're bringing their content online and they're doing these after parties in these like online chat rooms, and
Yeah, it's
they're doing,
access.
it's all about the
Yeah.
access. You know, are you a VIP member? Do you get access to their Patreon? Do you have all this other stuff? You know, that's where I see a lot of that happening now. And especially with those of you that are, you know, doing music on the streaming platforms, that's even harder because you can't see who's actually streaming your music. You can see the numbers, but there's no way to know, like,
There's
hey,
no
I
lead
wanna go-
capture.
Right. Yeah. You can't go retarget those people and say, hey, thanks for checking out my song. By the way, did you know I have this? Or did you know I have this? Or, hey, you know, if you want to be part of my Patreon, here's all of my behind the scenes where I'm writing my music and doing demos and all this kind of stuff. Like, those are things that, even though it's there, and you could probably do a lot of that stuff, and I'm sure you do some of that as it is, but there's
Josh, we gotta get a pixel on his links to
there you go
on his homepage into like the different streaming platforms, and you can serve ads back to the people that click those links. Like,
yeah, and I've gone down that road. Like I know you all are experts in a lot of that stuff. And I've certainly gone down that road. And I'll be honest though, like I guess where I am in my life and in my career and stuff like that, like it's sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze for me on it, because
Sure.
like I'm not. I mean, I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off my music, and I'm certainly not trying to like. I love the idea of retargeted people who want to be retargeted. Like, if people love your music and want to know what's coming next, obviously those are the people that I want to reach, and I want to
right.
be able to reach new people who love artists that I, am similar to and probably dig my stuff or whatever. But I'm also not going to spend 60 hours a week trying to build like the click funnels and the automation to make that into some sort of profitable thing, or at least enough profit where it's really worth it for me. So it's kind of an interesting space I'm in, because I'm trying to figure it out a little bit, like where do I want to sit and how much time and effort do I want to put into that stuff, which I've done quite a bit.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think that you have the right mindset anyway, where it's not like, I mean, sure, most folks like want to make money, right? Cool. But when that's not like reason 1A, that's okay, because you're servicing, you're doing the music. Like, if you love it, do it, right? If you're servicing like an audience, and it's a brand your music's an experience for whomever happens to listen to it, and that's why you're doing it, that's okay too. Like, all those different reasons that you can put ahead of money are purely like it's, for one, okay, and probably two, like a better reason to be doing it anyway than just I'm here for a buck.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm certainly not religious about any approach to it. Like I think there are I know there are professional songwriters who, I mean, they go out and, I mean, really their top motivation is I want to write a hit that is a hit. And then 1B and 1C and whatever and I want to write something meaningful and I want to write whatever. And that is, to me, as noble a pursuit as I will never take any money for anything I do, like the opposite extreme. And I think people get a little religious or dogmatic about both sides of that, which it seems silly to me.
Life's a balance, for sure.
Yeah. I will say it's been freeing, this record that I'm like in the middle of putting out right now, just because the motivation wasn't money at all. In fact, it's very much a COVID record. My day job, we kind of were told, hey, you're going to be working from home for a couple of weeks, and then like a ton of other people in the country that quickly looked like it was like, oh, this is not just going to be a couple of weeks, it's going to be a really long time.
Yep.
And I happen to have been writing a bunch of stuff over the last couple of years and so on and so forth. And so, kind of upgraded a little bit of my gear and went, I think I'm going to do a whole record. Like, I have a whole record's worth of stuff. And it was super fun and super new for me as well. Before all that happened, I think it was the second or third week of March in what it would have been 2019. Is that when all of this was happening, or was it 2020? I can't remember which year anymore. 2020. My wife and I were going to go in the studio and cut like 4 or 5 songs for a couple of days, and all that stuff hit, and we were like a week beforehand, and I was like, I don't think we should get in a room with a bunch of people we've never met for 3 straight days. That sounds like a bad idea. So we canceled that studio time, and I've got a good friend who I've known for a long time from LA, who is he is one of the professors of audio engineering at Belmont University in Nashville, and has been for a really long time now, and is just can't even tell you the amount of credits he has to his name as far as he produces, he mixes, he masters, he plays, he publishes. He just has his fingers in just about everything music business wise. And I kind of don't like hitting up people for favors that often, but I called him up and I was like, hey, don't want to waste your time or whatever, but I got these songs, looking to make a record. Like, do you know guys, like nobody's touring right now. Do you know guys that have home studio that are pro session guys that I could reach out to? And he's like, I have spreadsheets of these guys. Like, just send me send me the song you want to do and I'll tell you who to call. And again, kind of lucked out and got a list of names that I had never heard before, and just sent these guys a message like, hey, here's kind of what I can afford and what I'm going to do. And I started with one song because I wanted to do one song start to finish and just make sure this comes out as good as it should come out, or I want it to come out. I'm not gonna,
for sure.
I'm not going to do it for 7 or 8 more if it doesn't come out like pretty great. And these guys start sending me the tracks back, and just one by one, my mind's just like explodes when the drums come back, because I'm like, how is this guy getting that in his home studio? And then I start Googling some of these guys, and I go, oh, because this guy Wes Little plays drums on like all these huge records, and the guitarist and multi-instrumentalist that plays on a lot of this stuff, his name's John Conley. It's like, oh, he's the lead guitarist for Kenny Chesney's touring band. That's why it sounds.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's been a trip to just have these, and now it's like I get on the phone with these guys and we've done a bunch of songs because we do them. I've been doing them like one at a time or whatever. And now it's just like blows my mind because John's like, what are you thinking here, man? I was thinking maybe do this or maybe do that. And you're like, I can't, like John Conley sitting on the phone asking me what he wants, what he wants me for him to play. A pretty cool thing that came from it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the band Ryan Adams and the Cardinals, but they're just one of my favorite bands, and the pedal steel guitarist for that band, his name's John Graboff, and I just love his work. And so after I completed 1 or 2 songs with these guys, I thought I had a couple songs that I wanted pedal steel on, and I was like, I'm already living in the bizarro world here. I'm just gonna hit this guy up on social media and just, hey, I really love your work with this band or whatever, and I'm doing this and don't want to waste your time, but if you're interested, here's the deal. And a day or 2 later, I'm on the phone with John, and he's like sending me, give me 20 minutes and let me send you an idea. And he sends me a thing back, and I'm like, that's it. Like, that's it, man. And he's like, all right, give me another hour and I'll send you the real take.
That's awesome.
Wow.
You go from kind of zero to your favorite pedal steel guitarist on the planet, like playing on your record.
That's crazy.
That is amazing.
Could you have imagined that happening back when you were playing those LA days? Something like that?
You know, it's so weird. That's just so beyond what I could have thought happening. And I've always been we've always been a sort of a band, and I've always been a musician that I do like when I meet other players or kind of make friends with them and stuff like that, to sort of do something together. So we would have, so there was this band out of Orange County called Wonderlove, who actually, after all of the guys in that band have gone on to do like pretty sweet musical things, but they decided to do a COVID record together for the first time in like 20 something years. That's out now as well. You guys should check it out. They're a very classic rock sounding band. But we would trade gigs with them where we'd go down to Orange County and we would open for them, because I said we have this really good audience in LA. Well, as good as our audience was in LA, it was like completely non-existent, and, you know, an hour and a half down the road. And then they would come up, and like we got to a point at the whiskey where our draw was so good we could actually like fill out 2-3 different slots, so we could sort of choose the bands that went on before us.
Nice.
And even if they didn't bring anyone, it kind of didn't matter, because we brought enough people to cover those slots, sort of thing. And like we'd have the guitarist for Wonderlove come up and play a song with us, or something like that, or little collaborative stuff like that. But yeah, to think that, I mean, these sort of caliber of guys who I'd never met before, and I was just gonna sort of call them up and be like, "Hey, man, do you want to play on this thing?" I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't even know how I would have gotten phone numbers like that in the past.
Kyle, this reminds me of one of our interviews a while back where we started to kind of get these interviews rolling, and there was I actually bought a course from a guy who's really, really well known in the affiliate marketing industry. He's like ClickFunnels top affiliate, and he released this course. And I was like, "Hey, Kyle, what are the chances you think I can get Spencer Meekum on here?" And he's like, "I mean, try it, but like that dude's high caliber." And I reached out to him on Messenger, and he was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And it's just like, it's those things, is if you don't take that shot, you're not going to get it, right? It's like the famous quote from Wayne Gretzky, right? Wayne Gretzky, is you miss all the shots you don't take. So it's like, that's the thing, is that's what really surprises people, is if you just do it, you might be surprised at what the result is, and you might actually get what you want because you actually asked for it.
Yeah, I think along with that too, and I kind of like my bio on my website kind of says this, but I think it's true. This record in particular is about trying to capture a little bit of humanity, and I don't mean humanity in this big sense. I mean like humanizing people, because people are just people. And the guy you're talking about, he's just a person.
He's just a dude, yeah.
And John Graboff is just a dude. He happens to be an amazing pedal steel guitarist, but he's just a guy that, like, and there are some people that you won't get through because there's way too much friction or too many levels of things to get to Slash or whoever. But if that's not the case, they're humans, and they still might say no, but if they're like, well, hey, yeah, I'm sitting around not doing anything anyway, so great, yeah, let's do it, man.
Yeah, that is really inspiring.
I think those. I was having a conversation with my son coming back from hockey practice today, and we were just talking about like effort and how sports kind of has this like transcendence of like all these lessons that you learn in your sport are applicable to like the rest of life, right? And so like your story, like that, and like what you're talking about, Josh, like those are lessons that you can take back to your kids, and trying to circle back on the whole dad thing for those two dads podcast. But like you can take those lessons, and like those are things that your kids can really be proud of, and that you can take. You're like, shoot your shot, right? But make sure you're prepared. And like you were talking about, Shannon, make sure you're not wasting anybody's time. It's like you're not fan servicing somebody. Like you went with a specific ask that was, detailed and was buttoned up, and they said yes. And it's okay if they say no. And I love what you said. Like they're just people, business or music or whatever are just a couple of people coming together with a big idea and some effort, and you get to make cool stuff, Yeah,
it's interesting because it's like I think the way we dehumanize people, you can do it on both ends. You can put them up on a pedestal like they're Michael Jordan, and so they would never speak to another human ever. But Michael Jordan talks to people every day.
Yep.
But then there's the other side where it's like they're not even a human, and they're just a robot, and they have no feelings or whatever. And I think that happens to sports figures as well, or movie stars as well, where it's like they can't have an opinion because they're just an actor, or they're just a basketball player, or whatever it is too. It's kind of funny how that works.
what you look at a lot of these people that have like crossed professions, right? Like where they've gone into sports and then they go into movies and then they go into music or whatever the case may be. And how many times have they been told, like a good example is like Dwayne Johnson, he went from doing wrestling into doing movies and then now he's releasing music. And it's kind of like people are like, well, Dwayne Johnson, you're a wrestler. And it's like, well, no, he's also a great actor and he's a voiceover artist and he's all these other things. But people see him as the actor, not the wrestler anymore, because that whole, even though he still goes on stage for that stuff and makes appearances, that's not what people are following because they've, like you said, they've categorized him. They've almost dehumanized him as you're just an actor now. You are just Dwayne Johnson, the actor.
Yeah.
And not looking at the fact that like I don't know how many people have listened to some of his music, but it's actually pretty good. I was fairly impressed. So
life's a journey, man.
Yeah.
And we're all on it.
And it's funny because Kyle, going back to like kids, I've got a 10-year-old son, and also I think all of us have been there, right? Like I don't want to sound like I'm coming from the pulpit or something, because I have dehumanized the crap out of people before and been like, I probably have said horrible things about anybody who was in NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys or whatever.
What?
But
how dare you?
But yeah, like, I mean, I don't want my 10-year-old son to think he can only be a this or only be a that.
Right.
I mean, that's a horrible example. Like Dwayne Johnson's a great example. Yeah, dude, do the thing that you want to do and carry out your passion. And if you get to age 20 and that changes to something totally different, then great.
Go for it.
Pursue the thing totally different with everything you got.
Well, and that's just the whole point of being a parent, not just a father, but being a parent, is our job should be to lead our kids in a positive direction, but not really control them, right? Like we're not here to be the dictators of their life. I mean, yes, we have to teach them things like responsibility and manners and all that kind of stuff. But what I found that's really interesting is there's usually two different types of parents that are categorized, right? You have the hover parents and then you have the no leash parents. And, the hover parents are always keeping their kids under a rock. You only do these things, a certain way. And then there's the no leash parents that their kids are categorized as like the wild child, the bullies, the unhinged children. But nobody ever talks about the parents that are we're just trying to make sure our kids grow up to be good human beings and teach them manners and responsibility and how to manage their emotions and how to do things, cook and clean and mow the lawn and whatever, and that's what it should be about. But like I don't think ever anybody decides they want their kids to be a specific way right away. It just kind of evolves into some of those things. And I think that as parents, it's our job to lead them down a path that's respectable, but also giving them the creative ability to do what they want without feeling like that they can't because they're not that specific type of person.
Oh yeah. And one of you said, take your shot. And like, I agree with that. I also agree with taking your shot, even if as a parent you go, that's probably going to fail. But like, there's a lot of learning that goes into taking a shot and failing. And
but that's a good thing. You should learn about failure. You need to learn about failure. A good batting average in baseball is like failing more than 3/4 of the time.
Exactly. Yeah. No. So my son and I, when my son was 6 or just about to be 6, he wanted to start skateboarding and get a skateboard. And I skateboarded for like a few years when I was in my, I don't know, maybe 11, 12, like early teenage sort of years. And I decided, like, I told him I'll relearn while you learn, and we'll do it together. And part of that was because I had this speech in my head about how skateboarding is about falling down and getting back up, and it's not about looking cool. Because when you first start doing it, like doing anything skateboard, you won't look cool at all.
No.
And I was like, man, that is like really cheap words coming out of your mouth if he's the only one that's doing the falling, and I'm just the one that's just, like sitting on the bench. Like,
You're like, great job, kid. Get back up.
so we've now been doing it for a number of years, but the thing that I love about it is exactly what you were just talking about with baseball. Is if you try a new trick, skateboarding, which is kind of what it's all about, it's trying something you haven't done yet. I mean, you will sit and fail at 100, 200, 300, sometimes 1,000 times at that one thing, and then you'll get it, and it'll probably be really ugly, and then you have to do it another 1,000 times to get it so it's automatic, and it looks good, or it feels right, and whatever.
Right.
And yeah, and a lot of times the failure has a nice little chunk of physical pain that goes along with it to remind you of the failure. Yeah.
But what a parable that is! Like, what, you know, that is life, like to a T. The first time you do something, you're supposed to suck at it. Like, you just, you know, phenoms exist, sure, but like most things that you're doing for the first time isn't going to be great. But by the time you do it for the 100th time, 1,000th time, 10,000th time, like those comparisons along the way, it's just a bell curve, or not a bell, but the help me out, Josh.
Yeah.
The slope graph. I can't even say it. But no, those are great lessons to have. I told my kid the other day, like, I needed to apologize to him because, like, I overreacted, as you know, dads can sometimes do about something probably petty.
Overreact? Never.
Right? Yeah, who does that? But I told him, I'm like, look, man, after I had a sincere apology, but I told him, like, I'm also growing, like, because this is my oldest. I'm like, you're my oldest son, and every experience that you have as a kid is the first time I'm having this experience as a dad, and I'm not going to be great all the time, but I promise you I am learning and I am going to get better. And so, you know, because I made this mistake, I'm going to learn from it and try not to make the same mistake again, you know? And so it's just that lesson about, you know, trying and learning and like doing things over, like, is transcendent across whatever we're doing for the rest of our lives, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. And that actually kind of segues into a question that I had, because, you know, we're sitting here talking about your journey. We're talking about just kind of how you got into making music before, and now you're getting into doing this, like your quote unquote COVID album, but, you know, your new album that's coming out and how you kind of sort of put that together. And so obviously in part of this process, you know, you've been building a family. You've got your oldest is 10. So how many kids do you have, Shannon?
Just the one.
Just the one.
Sawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
one
kid, you know, you are writing music. You do also, from what we understand, you also have a full-time job during the day. Like, how was that trying to balance all these things? I mean, did you take a break from music to start raising your kid and now get back into it? Or were you still doing shows and writing music in that process? Like, take us through kind of how that all worked out.
Yeah, I took a long break from doing any shows for, I mean, 5-6 years, really. And you're talking to somebody that at one point in time, I mean, to say I was a touring musician is a little bit of a stretch, because it was more like we all quit our jobs and took like a really long vacation, but we played shows all over the country, because like, you know, we weren't making any money at it at all, and sometimes we were playing for the bartender and the other bartender, but there'd be nights too where you were playing to 20-30 people and stuff like that. But I mean, I had about a year's period of time where I was playing between 4 and 6 nights a week, every week. And then even prior to that, sort of in the Los Angeles and playing at the Whiskey Days, I mean, we were always playing a show like every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You kind of didn't want to play them too close together because you wanted to make sure and get everybody out. But we knew when the next show was,
Right.
almost always. And then when I moved to Austin, I was still would still just go to open mics and stuff like that. And then really when I had my son, that part of it just kind of had to go away, or I chose for it to go away because there's more important things to focus on. And the last thing I wanted to be was up until 11:30 or midnight or something like that. Because especially when they're young, we all know the morning comes early.
Oh yeah.
And luckily for me, I would always, I don't think I wasn't really consciously sitting down and writing a bunch of songs, but I'm one of those people that just has a little idea come to my head. It might be just like a little riff or a line or a part of a melody or something. And I can't tell you how amazing having a smartphone with a little memo record like that sounds like a small deal, but when I used to have a Sony mini disc player with a stereo microphone. I remember when I got that, I was like, thank God I don't have to remember all this stuff, because I would have to play a song like 30, 40 times and write it in my notebook. And that's the only way I would remember it. And if I forgot it, then it was gone. Like,
right.
Oof. And so to be able to have something as ubiquitous as your phone and be able to just go tra la 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 la, like that's the idea. And then 2 months from now, I might have a little bit of time and go, okay, I think I had I got an hour and I think I had some ideas. Like, let me just listen through what I had. I'm like, well, that's dumb. And then, and so that's how it kind of worked when Sawyer was younger, for sure. And so, way less full songs were getting written, but there'd be little snippets and little ideas. And every once in a while, there'd be enough time to be like, oh, well, that's actually a really good idea. Let me write the rest of that. And I still really don't play live that often. I'm kind of kicking the tires on what that might look like over the next year or so. I probably would have tried to go back and do it a year and a half ago, but with all the COVID stuff, it was like, okay, well, I'm not even going to go down that road of putting in a bunch of effort and then going, I don't feel safe, and then not doing it anyway.
Right.
So, but yeah, aside from a handful of shows over the years, I haven't done it much, but I have done a lot more focused writing and recording, because a 10-year-old he'll go out and jump on the trampoline for an hour just by himself and be like, leave me alone. I want to go jump on the trampoline, or watch a movie or whatever. So it just allows you more time. And then, I'm sure if you guys have kids that are that age or older, you've had these moments where you're like, well, now what am I supposed to do with myself?
Yep.
that he doesn't want me here for an hour.
Well, that was my oldest. So my oldest is 13, and you saw him probably pop in and give me a hug earlier, but he comes home from school now, and it's pretty rare that we see him before dinner. Like, it's just, he'll go in his room and he's got a whole tub full of Legos, and he creates stuff, and he does like stop motion videos, and he's enjoying himself and being creative. And sometimes he draws, sometimes he reads, but it's all stuff that's good and developmental for him, and it helps him grow. So he's not just like sitting in front of a video game for a couple hours before dinner. But it's still one of those things where when I have days off of work myself, and I kind of go, well, if the youngest is at school and like the oldest is hanging out, or maybe the youngest is doing whatever he wants to do, because my youngest is almost 6, and it's like I'm starting to realize I have more free time on my hands. And so you start thinking like, well, I used to have to take care of you, but now I don't have to take care of you because you can take care of yourself. So I guess I can go run on the treadmill, or I can go do something. Or now it's for me, it's creating content. Now it's record another video, or write some emails, or write a blog. But I get it. Like it's you start thinking about all those times that you actually had a job as a dad to do something specific. And now they're just kind of that time is back.
Yeah, it's funny, the last really year and a half, and especially, I mean, part of that's been a little bit working from home, because all of a sudden, if I have a meeting that ends 10 minutes early, I don't have to walk anywhere or anything. And there's
Right.
like, I'm not in an office, and I obviously have guitars just like hanging on the walls. And all of a sudden, that little idea that I had yesterday, you're like, hold on, I got 10 minutes to work on that idea. Like today, like 24 hours after I came up with that idea, I could go back and work on it. Which is, it's funny how it affects everything, because I'm certainly a proponent that a lot of my songwriting happens subconsciously while I'm like asleep or just about to fall asleep or very groggy and waking up in the morning, because I'll kind of come up with an idea and start working on it or whatever. And then I think my mind kind of works some of it out while I'm sleeping. And then I'll come in the next day, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this. And it's not like I dreamt it or anything like that. It's just all of a sudden I could see it the next day. But if you don't come at it the next day, I don't think your mind cares, because it doesn't think there's going to be a shot at it or something like that. And I've had a lot more of that happen over the last year and a half, where I knew there was an idea that was good and it was worth pursuing. And I kind of had 2 or 3 days in a row where I could spend an hour or two on it. And it makes a big difference.
For sure. Oh man. Like, as we're talking, I'm feeling like there's so many similarities between the process of being a musician and the process of being a marketer. Like, just like you're talking about the ideas aspect of it, how many times I've gone to bed and the same thing, Kyle and I were talking about Evernote as we were just getting on the, before we were getting on the call. And like, I've got a whole, I mean, if you could see what my Evernote looks like, you would be like, wow, you probably have way too many things in there that you've never touched, because it's all different ideas I throw out, different things I've got a whole list of content ideas and things that you look at it and you go, nah. And then you might say, nah, probably 50, 60 times. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, maybe that, but just twist it a little bit. And then that light bulb kicks on. And then you do something for 10 minutes and then you're done, because it's either late at night or early in the morning. And then either later that day or the next day, the rest of it comes through, because you gave yourself that opportunity to let it kind of fester and formulate. And I mean, I do that with email sequences when I want to write a sequence for a product launch or something like that. Like, that stuff just kind of has to come into play. You can't just sit down and do it all at once, because you don't think like humans don't think like that. We think in chunks. So it's kind of cool, like, to be able to bridge those similarities between the two. So let's, we're getting, I just realized we're at like 53 minutes, which is crazy. The conversation's been awesome. We've been learning a lot, and I don't know about you, Kyle, but I'm learning a lot about what it's like to be a musician and, have different phases of life. I've never had this deep of a conversation with a musician before. So understanding how you've gone through these different phases of life is awesome.
Hey,
But
Josh, people are just people, buddy.
Yeah, I hear you. People are just people. I see what you did there. But you're right. It's interesting to see the inside work that's done. The fact that you're just like the rest of us, that ideas come to you at random times, and I think people forget about that, right? They forget about that. We all are similar. We're all very like creatures, and we all do things in a very similar way. It just depends on what you're doing it for. But so let's talk about some music, huh? Like, we've been talking about how you've been creating music. So you just had a song release here last month, or not last month, February, end of February, called Man of Your Dreams. And like, take us through that single. That's obviously part of your new album, but what is that song about, and kind of what brought that song together?
Yeah. So there's a little bit of irony in that song, because the first line of that song is, "I'm not the man of your dreams," and so my wife has this happen a lot, and I don't know why it happens, but she'll wake up and it'll be like whatever morning, and she'll look at me and go, "You were horrible to me in my dreams." And she has these dreams where I'm in it, except for the me that's in it is like just saying terrible, terrible things to her, or whatever it is. And it's like has happened for years. I don't know why. We have a very good relationship, and I'm not that horrible person to her in real life.
My wife
That's
says,
all right. Heather will wake up mad at me too for something I did in a dream. It's fine.
Totally.
It happens.
And but then I kind of, I don't know, for some reason one day that really hit me as a good metaphor. And not just the juxtaposition of like, I don't want to be the man in your dreams because the man in your dreams is like a bad guy.
Yeah.
But if we go back to like people being people and putting people on pedestals and trying to capture a little bit of humanity. I mean, nobody's the man of anybody's real dreams, even in the classic standpoint. Nobody's the perfect husband or the perfect wife or the perfect anything. And I think as my wife and I, we've been married a pretty long time, and it's just as our relationship deepens, you figure out that that's not even what you want. You don't even want a perfect person. Like that would suck to be married to somebody perfect, because I'm not perfect, or it'd be bad if I was perfect and she wasn't, or whatever.
Well, what a standard to live up to, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what you're really looking for is imperfection and being real about the imperfection and your shortcomings and working on them, and you know, like true kind of emotional intimacy or whatever. And so that was kind of the spurring of the entire idea. So there's kind of the verse about me not being the man of her dreams, and then there's a verse about her not being the woman in my dreams, and then because we're a three-piece family, the third verse is about the kid not being the I think it's the line is, I'm not a poster child, so it's like the kid's not the perfect kid either. And then hopefully the chorus drives it home, where it's more like you know, we're gonna come up short, but that's not the point.
Right. No, it's cool. That was, you know, when we got the request to have you on the show, and you know, that was one of the first things that I did, is I was like, well, let's go listen to his new music. Like, let's go check that out. And it's interesting when you listen to it, because it does kind of hit different, where it's not talking about the typical things, you know. And I think that goes back to, you know, when we talk about your work and the reason you do things, and kind of how you view your music and what your goals are and that kind of stuff, that song really does kind of play into that. Of it's really talking about the human element of what it means to be in a relationship, right? You know, there shouldn't be this expectation of this super high standard. And that's what a lot of people do. They have this high standard and they go, I need this. And somebody that could be the best person for them is maybe not quite up to that standard, but their standards are so high that they don't realize that could be good for them. So it definitely is an impactful song. I listened to it a few times and I really enjoyed it myself. And that's part of your new album coming up then too, right?
Yeah, that is. So the album's called Run Into the Arrows, and there's a song on it. The first song on it is called Run Into the Arrows as well. Both that song and Man of Your Dreams are already out, so you can stream those on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever digital platform.
And we'll put a couple links to those in the bio.
Yep.
There.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then I'm kind of like I said, I'm sort of learning how to release music in the new age. So the way I'm approaching it is I'm sort of releasing a song every kind of 4 to 8 weeks. And instead of just doing like 1 or 2 singles, I'm pretty much going to do the entire album as single songs throughout the next few months. So the whole album should be out in September, I think is kind of the timeline right now. Nice. I will say I had quite a moment the other day, and I don't know why I don't have one of these handy. I should, but that's okay. But it's the first time I've pressed to vinyl before. So I did a very short run of vinyl for this album. And if you guys don't know anything about the vinyl manufacturing process right now, it is extremely backed up. It takes a very long time for it to happen, even for major labels and
Wow.
stuff like that. So I think I placed the order for these records in November, and I just got the first pressing of it a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is pretty cool. So even though the full album won't be digitally released until the fall, if I figure out the live show thing and you happen to be hanging out around near Austin, Texas, you might be able to buy the vinyl record if you want to.
That's pretty neat.
Oh man, that's got to be pretty sweet to think about, though. You're on vinyl, just hanging out, you know, coming up in the 90s like that. That would have been just so sweet to have.
It's a weird deal because a couple of friends were like, well, that's got to be a first time thing for you, because vinyl wasn't even really a thing when you were doing like your other band back in LA. And I was like, yeah, nobody even thought about pressing to vinyl in the early 2000s, which is when we were doing that.
I remember growing up though, having record players in my folks' house.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, so like it's just a bucket list check, maybe, you know.
It kind of was. It was a little bit of a, I mean, I only pressed 100 copies, and I can tell you that somewhere around 30 of those copies are already spoken for as just gifts for family members and close friends and like the guys that played on the record and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a little more of a hey, I can figure out a Christmas gift for a bunch of people, and I get to have my own copy of my own record.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool too, because it's kind of like when people release books, right? Like when I released my book, and you know, you give copies away to people as a gift, and people go, okay, well, you know, like nobody's ever going to look at that and go, oh, thanks, you know, like, yeah. It's exciting because they're like, hey, this is you, this is your album, this is your vinyl. Like it's an exciting gift to get. And so, you know, if I was in your family, I'd be super excited to get something like that. And it would probably, you know, be displayed somewhere and be like, hey, look, I know that dude. Like that's my family member or somewhere, or, you know, a friend of mine or whatever. But so new album, you're releasing that one song at a time. And what is the next one that's coming out then?
The next one is a song called Heartbreak Eyes that will come out on Monday the 18th. And again, that'll be kind of on all the digital platforms as well. So yeah, excited about that as well. I'll tell you that you know, I talked about John Conley playing guitars and some of the stuff on it. I forgot to mention that on Man of Your Dreams, I know you guys had heard it. The violin riff on that is so some of the songs I've sent to the guys, and there's been little parts that it's sort of like real specific, like in this spot I want this, and in this spot I want that. And sometimes I'm just sort of strumming an acoustic guitar and I just go, do your thing, like just give me back whatever you come up with.
Right.
And on Man of Your Dreams, that's exactly what happened. I just had the chords. And then, you know, John's like, what do you want here? And I'm like, I don't know, John, just like do what you're going to do. And I didn't even know he played violin at all, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me because he plays a million things, and plays mandolin on the record and a bunch of other stuff. And he comes back and the main riff in it is that little violin riff. And I'm just like, oh, that's so good. Like that's it. Like that's like half the song right there is that riff. And then flipping over to Heartbreak Eyes. Heartbreak Eyes is way more of a kind of roots classic rock kind of sound. So like early Wilco or even Tom Petty-ish. Sure. But same guy who's playing the guitars, and yeah, it's a good kind of rock and roll song, which I can tend to go on very long streaks of writing very not rock and roll songs. So luckily for me, I got a couple on this record while I was writing stuff for this one.
Man, what an awesome experience though, just on its own. Just, getting your music out there, getting to work with like some of these world class musicians, like just so cool. Like, I'm jealous.
It's funny because it's very humbling, and then it just gets me so excited as well. I'd also can't forget to say as well, one of my good friends. So the band I was in LA, which I don't think I said, it was called Come and Go, and that was the band with my brother. Which is also there's an album called Shinebox that we did in the early 2000s that's out on Apple Music and Spotify and stuff like that. But one of the guys that really helped us out with that record, he co-produced it, but he plays a ton of the guitar on it. His name's Dustin Boyer, and Dustin and I have known each other for forever now, and we keep in touch and have been buds ever since we worked on that album together. He is the lead guitarist. Touring lead guitarist for a guy named John Cale, who's one of the original members of the Velvet Underground, and still in Europe, sells out very large theaters.
I was gonna say the name sounded familiar, and I was like, I know that name. Why do I know that name? Velvet Underground. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So and Dustin he's one of those sort of mad scientist guitarists who, I mean, I remember when I didn't know him very well and we were doing the record, and somebody just came up to him and went, "Man, just play something that just smokes real quick." And he's like, "Oh, you want some smoke?" And then he just like puts his guitar behind his head and plays the most ridiculously fast, complicated thing you've ever heard in your life, and without even trying. Like, he's that kind of guy.
Yeah,
but he can play the weird spacey stuff too, and he does the guitar work on a couple of the songs on the record as well, that I wanted like that specific type of vibe. So I had to call him up and I was like, "Man, you have to play on this." So does some amazing work too.
That's awesome. Well, and that's something that it's so cool. Like Kyle said, you're getting these people that are like, there's people in the world that would probably look at this and they would be total fanboy, fangirl, moment, and be like, "Oh my gosh, like you got this person to be on your record." And, you're over here like, yeah, it called them up and they said yes. And, I love how, like you said, it's humbling, right? You're realizing that you have a lot of this talent on your album, and it gives you an opportunity to really appreciate the level of work that goes into that kind of stuff, and putting it all together. And now you're going to be able to share this with so many people. I mean, like we talked about early on, people you don't even know, and they're going to be able to experience these other people's music because of your ambition and your work ethic and your headstrong nature to go out and actually connect with these people. And they're going to see them in a different way because, yeah, they know, like, you get somebody touring with Kenny Chesney. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's the lead guitarist of Kenny Chesney." But now it's, "Hey, this guy plays this really cool track on this guy Shannon Hudson's album. Like, let's go check that out." And so it's a really cool experience to have. And I applaud you.
Also validating experience too.
Oh,
for
yeah.
your own and leadership and skill.
That's been, I think that's kind of validating is a good word. It's like the humbling and the validating at the same time, because I also, as much as I go, "Hey, they're just people," I've had to kind of pinch myself a couple of times where a couple of those guys are, "Man, I really like what you're doing on this one song, and do you think that riff really fits?"
It's like,
and
oh.
and yeah, if you kind of get past the starstruck or whatever, you're also like, this is a true professional treating me like a true professional as well, and like they see enough value in it that they want to bring like their best self and work ethic to it too, which I can tell you, when I got to the vocal takes for this album, which I do last, because I always want all the instrumentation there before I start singing to it, so I can hear everything that's going to be going on. And luckily for me, I can do the vocals here in my home studio, so I'm not
Nice.
paying for studio time or whatever. And I mean, there were a lot of full days on a song that I just had to throw them out. So I'm like, that's not good enough. Like, like look at what's in front of you. Like, that's just not it. You're not having an A+ day today. We're not keeping it. And I was lucky enough to have the luxury to be able to come back to it and try to get the A+ day.
I just had this vision of you looking at yourself in the mirror, being like, "Not good enough today, dude. Come on, Shannon." And
well, it's funny because it's less about the motivator and it's more, I mean, there's just no way around it that sometimes your allergies are just getting you a little bit or whatever, and sometimes that makes no difference singing at all, and you're on it that day and great, and sometimes it does make a difference. And I kind of made the point to sort of, well, I'll just put in the work anyways if I have the time and see what I get. And the worst thing that can happen is I get something great. And, and if it's, but yeah, there were definitely a handful of days where it was like, today's not your day, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you showed up and you put in the reps, and it ultimately was what, all that culmination of work to, come together as an entire album that you're releasing. It's just super cool. Super cool.
For sure. I agree. Well, Shannon, man, this has been such a great experience. I'm really, it's awesome to have you on here. Awesome to hear your story and really understand where you're coming from. And just the journey that you've been on is such a unique journey. This is from from my perspective, for sure. Like being able to be playing at, at the Whiskey and all these different clubs in LA, and then going and touring around the country, and then deciding to settle down and
tabling your music for 5-6 years and coming back to it.
Like it's really cool to like, I could feel that progression, right? As you were talking about each one of those things, I could feel the passion, and I could feel that when you made the decision to not write music or not do much in the way of music for a while, like, it didn't feel to me that you were like, yeah, I just kind of didn't feel it. Like, you obviously put attention to your family and put attention to raising a child and doing the dad thing, and then turning around and, making a point to, sorry, Kyle's camera just went off, and I'm like looking at it like, I'm like, where'd he go? So it got me distracted. But dude, I think this was, I think he lost connection. Sweet. Bye, Kyle. He'll be back. He'll come back in. But it's been super cool to have you on here. And for everybody that's listening, www.shannonhudson.com. That is the place that you can get to his music. He's got some stuff right there. He's got some links to his other platforms on there. And so we've got the newest release right now is Man of Your Dreams. The new song coming out on Monday. So Monday, April 18th, 2022. That is Heartbreak Eyes. And that's, you said, like, that's more of a little kind of a rock riff on that one. And then as far as it goes for, there he is. He's back. And then as far as it goes for the album, that's coming up probably September timeframe. But guys, keep an eye out for some of the music out there. I listened to a couple of his songs, and Shannon, I have to say, I'm not generally a like, just being completely transparent, I'm generally not a country guy, but I didn't feel that it was like straight up country. I mean, yeah, you get some of the steel guitars, you get some of that stuff in there, and those are pretty staple country sounds. But I really I like the way that it's described in your bios and things like that. Americana / country. It's not straight just that country feel. The lyrics don't sound country. Like, it's very unique, and I like it, and I think a lot of other people will too.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, I would say if you had a top 40 country station, they would say this is not gonna go on our station because it's not that type of country music, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's always somewhere between kind of a little bit of classic rockness and a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll, I guess.
Well, it probably comes from some of those roots, right? Growing up listening to bands like Led Zeppelin and Elvis and some Aerosmith and stuff like that. Like that influence is always going to be there. So it doesn't surprise me that some of that would come out in some of the music. So I'm excited for
Definitely.
Heartbreak Guys. I'll have to listen to that when it comes out on Monday.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Our pleasure,
for
man.
everybody else listening, make sure to like our podcast, subscribe, hit those notification bells so that way you can get notified when we put new stuff out. And Kyle, send us off.
Until next time, guys.
Later.